Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker shills, dead slaves, sirs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. Let's go to this strange set of stories that have to do with WikiLeaks recently. This last week, of course, we saw WikiLeaks shut down, and there was reports that weird reports all over the internet about Assange, Julian Assange being killed, or something being, WikiLeaks being shut down, etc. But apparently Ecuador stepped in and cut it off, and all the information I've seen is still pretty vague, and there doesn't seem to be anything direct. But of course, immediately people started thinking about the fact that all this material has been coming out just for the election on WikiLeaks that have to do with Hillary Clinton, including these new interactions with Podesta. But anyway, the fact that WikiLeaks was essentially cut off at their home base, of course, is very controversial. But you tie it together with the fact that these lawyers that have been involved with Julian Assange seem to be meeting untimely deaths, and there's now a third one. The first death was John Jones, a lawyer involved with Julian Assange, who was killed by a train, of all things, on April 18th in London. And then Michael Ratner, another Julian Assange lawyer, was killed in New York on May 11th. So very close together. They died within a month. And now we have a third death, Gavin McFadden, a close confidant of Julian Assange in London and a director of WikiLeaks. And he just died October 22nd, 2016. So we have three people around Julian Assange that have been killed. And granted, I'm not necessarily going to read a conspiracy into it automatically because it's so suspicious. But the fact is, it's suspicious enough that all these people involved in this circle are dying within a short amount of time, particularly in light of all these recent WikiLeaks leaks. Certainly casts a dark shadow over these events, because the fact is that John Jones was involved in all sorts of other projects, and certainly not Julian Assange lawyer by himself, and neither was Michael Ratner. He also was involved in many other things, so it could be sheer coincidence. But one has to look at these things, because the fact is, I think everyone needs to understand that these kind of things do happen at these levels of society and these levels of power and money. People are being killed, and there's all kinds of nefarious ways to do it. And, we've seen everything from radiation used by KGB agents to go after rogue elements around the globe, but we also have all sorts of ways that people can be killed. These supposed suicides, for example, John Jones here supposedly hit by a train is kind of intimated that it's a suicide, but apparently there's no reason why he would want to do that. And that's one of the easy ways to do it. But there's also ways that heart attacks can be faked, and all sorts of things. But anyway, like I say, I think the important thing here is not necessarily to point the finger and say this is definitely a conspiracy, but just to keep in mind that the fact is people are killed for their involvement and things at this level, this level of power, and this level of money. And tied in, of course, with this whole story, with these people dying that are associated with Julian Assange in WikiLeaks, is all the banker deaths. So we've had this string of unseemly and questionable banker deaths over the last year or so, and a lot of these figures have been involved in a lot of the investigations and resultant fines that have been levied against a lot of these big banks. But it's hard to not tie these things together and once again take away from that story that at that level, certainly global banking, I mean, you can bank on the fact that people are going to be killed at that level for things that they know and things that they do. And I think it's just a given. I think anyone that doesn't believe that those sort of unsavory and violent activities happen in the corridors of power, they're certainly kidding themselves and certainly naive. But anyway, in fact, looking into a couple of these articles, it turns out the same coroner was involved in investigating some of these lawyer deaths associated with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. And JPMorgan banker deaths, specifically one who jumped from a building to his death. Another very questionable way for a well-adjusted, theoretically a well-adjusted, successful, happy banker to be jumping off of buildings. And of course, who could forget the banker who supposedly committed suicide with a nail gun? So that kind of says it all. But there you go. People around WikiLeaks kind of disappearing and dying, and WikiLeaks being cut off at a very opportune time. It's hard for me not to read the involvement of the Clintons and their cronies, because the person who's getting hurt the worst right now by WikiLeaks and is being targeted the most by WikiLeaks right now are the Clintons. And as we know, they are fully capable of retribution of every kind against their foes. And so it has to be considered suspicious. And I'll leave it at that. If you want to go see other YouTube channels where they say Hillary Clinton is out there personally killing all these people, then go for it. And post those links below, because I'd like to read about it too. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.